The Midwestern old money types are different. They're not Park Avenue. They're lakefront property. They don't flaunt it, and they don't talk about it. That's how you know they have it. Louis Auchincloss.
Just because Midwestern wealth is not as flashy and understated doesn't mean it's not there. Welcome to Analyzing Finance with Nick. We're bringing back the Geography of Wealth series to discuss the Midwestern United States, particularly the Great Lakes region. This area of the country has been more in the news to economic decline due to manufacturing moving out of the region over the last 50 years. And has been a net loser of globalization. However, it doesn't mean there were a lot of fortunes made from industrial wealth, agricultural wealth, or other means throughout the centuries in America. In fact, even though the Midwest was much more newly settled than the American South, the money that is in the Midwest is much older on average than the American South today. And a lot of the great robber barons, such as the Rockefellers, hail from this region. So we're going to break down some of the cities in the Midwest, where the old and the new money tend to be from. And we're also going to include, which I might do a separate video about this for other regions, like popular vacation destinations for old and new money, because the old new money split is not just in terms of where people live permanently. It's also where they vacation or have second homes. And since the Midwest is fairly concentrated and doesn't have as many local vacation spots, I'm going to merge them into this video. But I might do one for just overall old money vacation destinations to cover other regions of the nation and international cities. With our Midwestern discussion, let's first start with Minneapolis and the Twin Cities. The Twin Cities has been one of the regions that's been the least impacted from deindustrialization due to a relatively more educated population and it being less reliant on heavy industry versus other Midwestern cities. And so as a result, there has been some new money developing here. And really the concentration of money for the most part in the Midwest is in greater MSP especially, is near the lakes. Minnesota is known as the land of 10,000 lakes, and there are a lot of lakes within the Minneapolis-St. Paul metro area. And another unique thing about Minneapolis, other than the proponents of lakes within the metro itself, is also that, unlike many other cities in America, the north-south wealth divide is reversed. Almost all of the wealthy, whether old money or new money areas, happen to be in the southern half of the metropolitan area. Like north of the Mississippi River, there's only really one older new money neighborhood, and that is in St. Paul, Summit Hill, which had a lot of old style Victorian houses and where some of the more original old money in the Twin Cities is. But outside Summit Hill, everything else is south and west of the Mississippi River. And maybe this has to do with the fact that Minnesota is considerably colder than a lot of these other metro areas. And the further north you get, the colder it gets. Or maybe it's other social and climatic factors, but I found this to be unique. So outside Summit Hill, the main other old money in like the core, which is the Twin Cities, Minneapolis, and St. Paul, are basically the neighborhoods near three lakes. You have the Lake of the Isles, you have Lake Scott, and Lake Harriet. And basically the neighborhoods surrounding here happen to be where the oldest money within the city limits of Minneapolis tends to be. And then when it comes to suburbs, the old money suburbs are Minnetonka and Edina, which happen to attract a lot of the wealth. And this is also historically where a lot of the professional athletes, particularly the Vikings, tend to live near this area historically. And then when it comes to newer money, it's mostly further out suburbs. There's not that much new money within the Minneapolis, St. Paul city limits. A lot of it, what people think is new money, is really just gentrified areas for urban professionals. So when it comes to like true like new money and like significant like wealth built from businesses and the like, it happens to be more out in the suburbs and also surrounding lakes. And there are two main lakes. One is Lake Minnetonka, and the area really in the northern half of Lake Minnetonka, the suburbs tend to be somewhere where the new money is in Minneapolis. This includes Orada and Woodland. And then the other lake is Lake Riley and the area surrounding there, particularly the place known as, particularly the area surrounding the Bear Path Country Club in Eden Prairie. So that is generally when it comes to Minneapolis. Next, we're going to be talking about Milwaukee. And due to Milwaukee being one of the hardest hit cities in America from deindustrialization and the growth of Chicagoland kind of overshadowing Milwaukee, there's really not that much new money in Wisconsin. There are some new money vacation destinations in Wisconsin, but in terms of like people like who live there full time, it's just not as prevalent. And it shows really through the geography. There's really only 3 really wealthy neighborhoods suburbs that stand out to me based on my analysis. Given I really haven't spent that much time in Milwaukee personally, I've been there for less than a day. And also with these Midwestern cities, I have not spent as much time in most of these outside of Chicago for extensive periods of time. So it will kind of impact my influence, make my research more second and third hand. But based on like the multiples of home prices, like in these neighborhoods that I mentioned, the average home price is about 4 to 5 times the median home price in greater Milwaukee, and as well as just their reputation. The neighborhoods that stand out in suburbs are Whitefish Bay on Lake Michigan, River Hills neighborhood, and Wauwatosa, particularly the Washington Park area of Wauwatosa. That's generally where the old money is in Milwaukee and Wisconsin as a whole. Madison is more of a college town, so it doesn't have the same old money and new money dynamics, and a lot of the rest of the state's either too rural or too hollowed out by deindustrialization. However, there is a lot of old and new money vacation spots in Wisconsin due to how nice the lakes are there in the summertime. And the first one of these, which is popular both among the wealthy in Milwaukee and Chicago, is Lake Geneva. There's actually a little Swiss town near here called New, which is kind of like the closest thing to a Swiss enclave you'd find in America. But Lake Geneva is a popular old money vacation destination in the Midwest. And the other one in Wisconsin, which is more new money oriented, is Door County, which is on this peninsula that splits off to the northeast from Green Bay. Next, we're going to move a little bit south and into Indiana. We already discussed Chicago in 2 previous videos, the North-South Divide video, which Milwaukee also seems to reflect, and the video where I specifically go into the dynamics of New York and Chicago, which was part 3 of this series. So if you want more in Chicago, go into that. Also, I will be in Chicago for likely the only Midwestern stop on the Analyzing Finance with Dick tour on June 14th. So if you Midwestern viewers want to meet me live, Chicago will be the place to be at. Now we're going to move on to Indiana, particularly greater Indianapolis. Old money in Indianapolis is on the north side. Indianapolis has a clear north-south divide. And basically the areas between Meridian Kessler and Williams Creek is what is generally regarded as the old money of Indy. And then the new money is really in outside suburbs. The 3 are Zionsville, Carmel, which is a very unique city because they basically replaced almost all of their streetlights with roundabouts. The area surrounding the Geist Reservoir. So all this lakefront area is a popular new money enclave. And the thing in common with these places, based on my experience in Indiana, seeing them, is that they're very spacious lots, very big properties, and they're still affordable compared to other parts of the country standards, but the average housing prices for these are $500,000 to over $1 million USD, whereas Greater Indianapolis has average property prices of less than $300,000 by comparison. So that's a considerably noticeable gap, and these places are considerably cleaner and have lower levels of crime and have more spacious lots and just have a more, high-end, old-timey vibe based on just my visits there personally. But that really wraps up Indianapolis. The next one we're going to be talking about is Columbus, Ohio, which for Columbus, Ohio, it's kind of the most newer money city. It's kind of the most young and dynamic city due to the growth and impact of Ohio State, whereas other cities in the upper Midwest, particularly Ohio, such as Cleveland and Cincinnati, have been in decline for decades due to deindustrialization. But just, Columbus is relatively new in terms of its recent development. It's still overall a pretty old city as the capital of a state that became a state in 1803, and also has been around for an extended period of time because of it. So the old money in Columbus is really two neighborhoods within the city itself. It's Upper Arlington and Bexley. And then the newer money is out in the north suburbs. And again, like Indianapolis and Milwaukee and Chicago, you see a clear north-south divide in Columbus as well. And the new money suburbs are Dublin, which I think is where Wendy's started of all places, and New Albany, which has similar income levels to coastal Orange County, yet housing prices are a fraction of that. But still, real estate's in these newer money areas is going to be $600,000 to $1 million plus versus home prices that are average sub $300,000 in the rest of the state of Ohio and greater Columbus. And then the last city we're going to talk about in terms of core residential areas is Detroit. And Detroit is the example of the most hollowed out, really, city from deindustrialization. It was the fourth largest metropolitan area in 1960, and it's gone down into the 20s today. And if you want to learn more about the decline of Detroit, I did a separate video about this a few years ago called San Francisco is the Next Detroit, where I go into how Detroit declined and why a modern San Francisco is at risk of repeating a lot of the same patterns. And so as a result, there's really not that much new money because as a result, people have mostly been migrating out of greater Detroit to other places in the country. And so there's really only two areas that stand out for wealth in Detroit. There's the old money district and the new money district. The old money district really is on Lake St. Clair and right next to the Detroit city limits. Very common, as I mentioned before, like on the water and near the city limit, but not in the city limit. It's a common trend for these old money neighborhoods. And it's this neighborhood called Grosse Pointe. So you have Grosse Pointe Woods, Grosse Pointe Farms, Grosse Pointe, but in general, this Grosse Pointe area is where you have the old money of Michigan and Detroit in particularly, whereas the new money is further north. And it does have a north-south divide, but like the southern parts of greater Detroit tend to be the lower income areas, and the northern parts tend to be more wealthy and middle class. And the new money is the most relative, one of the most northern parts, and it's in Oakland County, and it's particularly two neighborhoods. You got Bloomfield Hills and Birmingham are the two suburbs that really represent new money in Michigan. And with that wraps up some of the core old and new money in some of the Midwest. But let's go on to vacation destinations. I mentioned the ones in Wisconsin. Chicago is also a popular urban vacation place for a lot of Midwesterners in general. But the other local vacation spot that's popular for Midwesterners is Northern Michigan, with the old money surrounding Mackinac Island, which is kind of like the Catalina Island of the Midwest and in a lake instead of really off the coast like Catalina, California. It's a lot nicer and less tacky than Catalina. Similar vibe in terms of no cars, but it's a lot older. One of the oldest luxury resorts in America, built in the 1890s, is in Mackinac Island. And there's a lot of old money enclaves right across Lake Huron in the Upper Peninsula as well. And then on the Lower Peninsula, the old money enclave near Mackinac Island is a place called Harbor Springs in Michigan, and Harbor Point too, which is considered kind of like an old money getaway place. Like this place is prohibitively cold in the winter, and it has some of the highest snow rates, fall rates in the country. But in the summer, it's actually one of the low key, most underrated places to visit. And then the more newer money area and Northern Michigan is a city called Traverse City, which is also regarded for having nice lakefront weather and I'd say ocean-like beach activities, but in fresh water. It's a very unique vibe. And the water, surprisingly, in this area are warmer than swimming in the coast in Southern California. So you can see the draw there, but Traverse City is relatively the new money. And the other thing that's unique about the Midwest is most of they don't have as many local vacation destinations. So a lot of them tend to travel. The old money area is popular for Midwesterners outside of the region are Scottsdale, Arizona for the winter and Tampa, Florida. In fact, generally, like Midwesterners tend to be more snowbird and winter travel due to the harsh winters and the heavy amounts of snow in the region compared to summer traveling like in other parts of the country, because summer is actually quite nice in many parts of the Midwest. Whereas new money is more international for its vacation destinations, whether that's the Riviera Maya in Mexico, whether that's going to Europe for vacations, and also California is a popular new money destination, even though it's not international for Midwesterners. So let me know what you think. If you are in the Midwest and I include your city, let me know where the old money and new money is there. And also, since I am not as personally connected to a lot of these places, I've been to most of them with the exceptions of Detroit and Columbus, but I still am not as knowledgeable as I probably am with some of the previous cities. So what did I miss? Let me know what your thoughts are. Are there some new money and old money enclaves in the Great Lakes metros that I've failed to cover? Thank you for watching, and I look forward to talking to you in the future.